The new generation is going to be bringing in capabilities that maybe the founders or the older folks are not can't even understand really. And so what promise, what innovation can come from that?
Welcome back to the Family Wealth Edge. Kristen, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited that we have a guest speaker today.
Yes, thank you. Dan McDonald, how are you today, sir?
I am doing very well, and thank you for having me. I appreciate
Good.
Dan,
the
I love
Dan,
your mahi.
thank you. Yes, I
Dan
caught it
also is
this
in
week.
the state of Florida, as you may have guessed.
yes. While
Mhm.
while we were prepping for this call, Dan, I made the joke to Dan that up here in Canada, we have a love-hate relationship with you Floridians because of your beautiful weather.
Certainly this time of year.
Dan, you have an incredible background that's taken you in different industries, government. I think I even read Department of Defense in your background. Tell us more about your career, your story, and the work that you're doing today.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So I'm a native of Indiana. I'm a Hoosier, right? Grew up in Valparaiso, Indiana. After high school, came down to Florida here and actually to live with my grandparents for a while and go to college. It was an opportunity for me, but also it was really a blessing and opportunity to be able to help take care of them.
Yeah.
They were on in years, and so as time went on, my grandfather he got dementia, and so I and then my brother joined later on, and we helped take care of him. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to go to college, right? And so one of the things that he always wanted me to do was, in his mind, wanted me to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And so I was going to the University of Central Florida, pursuing an engineering degree, and then realized at the same time that I wanted to be a psychologist.
Wow. Yeah.
Long story short, I combined both of those. So I ended up with getting a master's in industrial engineering and then a PhD in experimental psychology. And people were like, "What? These are two separate fields completely. What possibly could they have in common?" Well, quite a bit, right? The idea of the humans and systems, and the
Yeah.
human component being the most adaptable part of a system, but also the most unpredictable, right? And probably the least understood, right? Engineering, you come forward and come up with engineering solutions, but the idea of the human, which will still remain in the system, even regardless of the artificial intelligence and everything else that's happening, we still want humans in charge, right? And so that idea of how do we marry humans and systems to ensure effective performance outcomes. And so I went to college, got my bachelor's, master's, PhD, and it's been quite a wonderful journey. I've done a lot of my work with the Department of Defense.
Mhm.
I started out with the Army Research Institute back in the day, working on first generation virtual environment technologies. And the question there was, how cheaply can we use these technologies, which were very rudimentary back then, to train our soldiers, right? And train our soldiers and do mission rehearsal. So we did what, 5 or 6 years as a research fellow with them. Then transitioned over to the Navy, the Naval Air Warfare Center, and the focus. And I had the real honor and pleasure of working under one of the most renowned teamwork researchers, Eduardo Salas, who's now at Rice University, right? And so really took more of the people focus at that point, right? And the idea is teamwork. And how do teams make effective decisions, and how do you build effective teams, sustainable teams
Yeah.
over the long run? So had a really good 5 or 6 years doing that, and then transitioned over to the Department of Defense proper, and had done a lot of work in that area since then. So it's been a wonderful journey. I will tell you that there's a lot of untapped potential in understanding and utilizing the understanding of people in these systems. And as we become more technology oriented, we can't forget the human in this mix, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's kind of an encapsulation, I guess that would, what kind of how I've gotten to where I'm at right now.
Dan, while you're speaking, before I pass over to Kristen. Now I know why she wanted you on the show, right? So what we're trying to accomplish with the Family Wealth Edge is a different conversation about family wealth,
Right.
right? And the way you're speaking about the human in the system, it's still human centric and it's untapped. That hits us at our core. One of
Okay.
the terms that we use is relationship capital.
Right.
And the research shows this, right? As families move through their life cycle together, it's difficult. You overlay wealth and complexity via
Oh, yeah.
structures and trusts and all this stuff. It gets really complex. And
Right.
what the research has showed, and our personal and professional experience, Kristen and I both being rising gens in our own family enterprises, is a reason why wealth fails or sputters through transition is because of the human breakdown in the system. So
Right.
looking forward to exploring this more with you on today's show.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, I was so excited when I met Dan. I was introduced to Dan through one of the coaches on my team. And the reason that we started working together is, Vincent, as you know, we do pre and post success
Mhm.
indexes for people going through our groups. And I knew that I needed some refinement there. And I knew that Dan was the person to do that for me. And I mean, our industry as a whole, and I think that this is the hard part of our work, that, the practitioners of our work, the consultants are going in with best efforts. And we've got a bit of research from, the likes of Dennis Jaffe and others, but it's just a bit of research. And so this whole complexity that you just described of the business culture layered with the family culture,
Yeah.
we really don't have a lot of key performance indicators. We don't have a lot of objectivity around what it is that we're trying to measure, what it is we're trying to improve across this family work that we're doing. And so, even as a family leader myself, as I look at my family, like, of all the things I could be focusing on, it would be really helpful if I could know what are some of the key things to be focusing on, right?
Yeah.
So I think that Dan is the man to help us get there. So Dan,
Thank you.
what can you say to us about how in the world we can make objective some of the KPIs in the world of family
Okay.
culture and
Okay.
family
So one of the things,
well-being?
Kristen, you just touched on is there are a lot of variables, right? A lot of variables. And so from a practical sense, you can't measure everything, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very deliberate and mindful about what you're measuring. It's very, it's costly. It's costly in terms of time. It takes it's obtrusive. So you want to make sure you're measuring with purpose. And I've been in organizations where they want to capture everything, and we got 72 different metrics and so on. And in an attempt to tell the whole story, you're telling no story at all, right?
Mm.
So that's one piece. Be very systematic about it. What I like to do is start using logic models, right? As an engineer, of course, what are those outcomes you're looking for? What are those outcomes that you really trying to achieve with multi-generational family business, for example? And so, the idea of sustainment, succession, so we come up with those outcomes and then work backwards in terms of process. What are the key processes? And typical KPIs, you do have those types of process measures, but in the more cultural realm or the human realm, those tend to be lacking. What are those human processes that ensure a sustainable, successful business across generations, right? Vincent, you mentioned a little while ago about when we were talking earlier about trust, right? Trust in an organization is a huge, huge a variable. One of the many variables that can be leveraged and looked at. But I would say that you have to be prudent in what you're trying to measure, so you're not capturing everything, and to be deliberate. And the idea is like thread it from the outcomes you're trying to achieve all the way back through your processes and how you do your work, right? In order to make that happen. One of the challenges I see in talking with Kristen for a little bit is that you're really dealing with two separate cultures when you're dealing with a family business. You have a very what I would call an implicit culture with family. It sort of develops on its own, right?
Uh,
In most cases, unless you're going to a family counselor or other things where they help to shape that. The idea is that a lot of it's implicit and really not even the families aren't even aware of their dynamics, right? In the business sense, you have to be much more formal, right? And more deliberate and your whether you're giving feedback, whether you're assigning roles, whatever that might be. And so that adds another layer of complexity that, let's say, doesn't exist in where I work, in the Department of Defense a lot of times. What the Department of Defense, uh, working with a lot of military, one of the things they do focus on, because military members roll out every 3 years, is succession. Who's taking over next? How do I develop the people behind me? And then how do I make sure that that handoff is successful, and that, in that process. And so a lot, and that presents challenges there as well. And I know I may have gotten a little off track in terms of what you're asking, but
No, that's fascinating. So I think what you're saying is that they're thinking about succession of their role from the very beginning.
correct.
Yes.
That's
Correct. They
interesting.
should be. They should be, right?
We
They should
we
be. And
we
that's,
we
maybe one of the challenges that is out there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I love how there is two distinct, could argue more, like we talk in these three circle models, family, business, and
Yeah.
ownership. And
Yeah.
each hat requires a different mindset, different skill set, etc. But I like what you said too. Like you go to a job or to a company, you're there to perform a role, and you get compensated for that role. So you could argue you're always on in the corporate world, trying to do your best. In
Right.
the family setting, it's where you come home, you can be the most casual. You
Yeah.
you are who you are. And I'm raising my two little boys, they're adopting both the good and the bad behaviors
Right.
that we have as people. And then to your comment, Dan, then you go through this life cycle of being a family. The families that we work with in the space that we play in, there is a lot of complexity, both with money and structure and responsibility, and in some cases, what's the word I'm looking for?
Perception?
Notoriety,
No,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
perception.
Yeah.
So it's you go to a job in a corporation, you're on. In the family setting, one of the things that Chris and I spend a lot of time on is really trying to help the rising gen, the young folks in the
Right.
family, step into their own responsibility and their own role. And it's so hard because, like you said, in the corporate setting, it's almost mandated that succession needs to be top of mind. Like, who's coming up next to fill this role? Where in the family, what we see is that leading gen oftentimes holds on too long,
Yeah.
and then a life event happens. Go down
Right.
the list, good and bad,
Right.
and family scrambles to catch up to the system or the culture to make an effective
Right.
decision. No, I'm rambling, Dan.
No, that's great. No, that's fascinating. So the leading gen has a responsibility, right? And really to broaden the perspective. One is if they were a founder, for example, right? They would tend to cling to the way they did things, particularly in the beginnings of a company and an organization. And as organizations mature, that might not be the recipe for success later on, right? And so, how I've done things in the past, that sort of thing. There's a real need, and mentorship is a key component, right? The idea is, how are you developing the next gen to come up, and the responsibility that is inherent in that. And so the other things that have come to mind is, I know we throw this term around as generational differences, for example, right? It's I think generational differences are probably more important at certain times in history, and this might be one of those, with the boom of technology and the way in which social media and everything is exploding, and the way in which we're going to be doing business is going to profoundly be changed in the next 5 years, and how business is done. And so that whole willingness to accept technology, from our younger generation, whereas the older generation doesn't. So there's a number of things like that to also consider, but that whole transition is important. And so having a succession plan, that's important, but then following that plan and actually executing is that second piece. I would say, and deliberately having mentorship uh, in that recipe.
Dan, I'm intrigued by what you're saying with the way that technology is changing so quickly. I wonder how that is manifesting in your work based on your consulting
Oh yeah,
recommendations that you're making to teams of, I don't know. And the story I'm telling
yeah.
myself is that that's like reverse mentorship or whatever from younger generations. But how is that manifesting in your work?
Well, it's certainly it's an education process for the senior leaders. We put on senior leader training and executive training, and they're I mean they're aware of it, but there's a little bit of a rigidity depending on especially sometimes in the military that we tend to be very structured, right? Even more
Mhm.
so. But an acknowledgement that that is an issue. There is a gap. There's a chasm there between the generations, and we'll have within from the most senior military members to the most junior, sometimes 3 or 4 generations, right? And so that just can understand profound challenges in communication and understanding one another, um, and then the acceptance of technology itself, right? Uh, More recently, there've been some policies where they've opened up, hey, let's use artificial intelligence. We're applying it in a lot of areas. My area right now, I've been focusing on training and how we can use artificial intelligence to natural language processing and other things to take vast amounts of data, sometimes survey data, and take that information and generate realistic scenarios for people in training environments or whatever that might be. And so there's a lot of a lot of potential. I'm still getting my head around it as well, right? And the rest of us. But bridging that gap, the best that you can is an important part of that piece, because the new generation is going to be bringing in capabilities that maybe the founders or the older folks are not can't even understand really. And so what promise, what innovation can come from that? What entrepreneurial inroads does that bring to the business? And so and I know I'm sort of getting off topic there, but that idea that giving them a seat at the right seat at the table so that they have the input that is needed in order to bring that, and that rising gen feels connected, feels a part of the decision making and part of that future narrative that's going to be built with the family.
I have two areas that I wanted. One is to go back to Kristen, what you talked about with respect to your peer groups and some of the lack of data in our industry. And the other piece, Dan, so you can take it whichever way you want, Kristen. So there's that, if we want to dig into that one, the peer groups, the work that you guys are doing together.
Mhm.
And I would be curious, Dan, some tips or ideas. How do we help some of the senior or the leading gen, like actually move into a different mindset, that culture, and leaving this place behind in a better way is the mandate for leadership. Some ideas that I'm sure you've dealt with some really tough uh older folks in
Yeah.
the military that are really stuck in their ways. So two parts, I guess.
Yeah,
So
let's go
whichever
there
one you
first, and then let's go there first, and then we'll talk about the data. This
want.
one's juicier. I like this one.
Okay, so how do I change or get leading gen or more
Let's
established?
call him dad. How do we help dad get out of his own
How do
way
we
so
help
he can
dad?
help
Don't help
improve
dad go
the
away.
Well, you appeal to what's important to them, which often is the bottom line, right? And often is show them what's in it for me sort of approach to it, right? And I can't say they're one size fits all.
Yeah.
But the idea that one, they want a legacy. They want that organization to thrive when they're gone, right? So that's an important value to them, and try to draw the path from where that organization sits today and the path to where it you all plan on where it needs to be. And how will that be enabled? Is it technology? Is it you know is in your succession plans? Do you have a plan for all of those members going through that process? How are you going to develop? And do you have a plan to act? Because there's so many plans out there, right? And like I said, a plan is a plan, but are you in, are you invested, and is it actually coming to fruition? Are you following through with the plan? So that whole follow through piece. But changing minds is not a touch and go endeavor, right? So it's but if they're coming to Kristen and Kristen is coaching and supporting them, they've taken the first step, and that's important. right? So they want that. So I would say that's probably an open door for some frank conversations about it. The fact is, I know no one lives forever. They want their family business and their legacy to live forever, and that narrative, right? And they want the well-being for their family. And so getting them in the room together with specific topics that might open up eyes for the leading gen it would be an important component for that. And let me think a little bit more as we go on, but that's an excellent question. That is an excellent question.
I do think I don't know, the profile is similar to a senior leader in the military is larger than life, very skilled, a lot of expertise, like in the standpoint of like the kind of trust, like you can trust their expertise and you can trust, their story, what they've built. And so I think that that's similar to the, I don't know, personality profile or experience of
Uh-huh.
a
Uh-huh.
common leading
Mhm.
gen family member that we have. And I feel like that is uniquely challenging when you can't argue with the fact that their way has worked remarkably successfully and
Right.
like they
Right.
really do have reason to believe that their way is the right way. And, given changing technology, given the fact that your son and daughter actually are quite different in terms of their profile and their skill set than you are, some things do have to shift and modify. And I think that then it's very, even with the best of intentions and even with that leading gen family member who does know, yeah, we got to do this. It's so hard for them to watch I don't know, I'll call it failures with like a small f, the failures and weaker areas of their next generation family members to watch that happening in front of them as they're, I don't know, like still on training wheels and stepping in, I feel like is very challenging. And part of the reason it's challenging is because these people are really remarkable, amazing people. And so I
Right.
think the mentorship for them is maybe somehow more challenging just because they're larger than life.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then certainly from the
and both,
perspective
and
of the
both.
rising
I
generation
mean,
family member.
are you referring to the military members being larger than life,
Yeah,
or
I
the?
think there's a comparison, an apt comparison between, a senior military official and your standard leading generation family member.
Yeah.
Just,
It, it,
the profile of who they are is pretty epic.
Larger than life.
it is. But I will tell you, the
Mhm.
best of them walk around with humility, right?
Yeah.
And that's the piece
Mm,
where they are
mhm,
relatable. And those are the ones that really oftentimes rise to the top, and those are the superstars. And you got others who were very proficient, and they were hotshot pilots or whatever, and they've gone through the ranks, and they may actually lack those leadership skills.
Yeah.
They may really, but they got through because of operational experience and other widgets wickets that they hit. But
mhm.
so there's a mixed bag there too, and I can imagine in your fields there are some larger than life, personalities as well, right?
For sure.
And so I like that.
Yeah.
I like that comparison. People are creatures of habit, and leading gen are going to be definitely creatures of habit, and so some of that is being giving them some skill sets that they can actually, because again their goal is the same, right? They want that legacy. They want their business and their family to flourish into the future beyond them. And so give them a set of skills that enable them to let go, as Vincent said, uh, but let go in a way that they're still there, right? And it's still there to guide and sort of that baton. But the creature of habit thing is if we rely on the habits that are developed around the family dynamic, it's not an effective way to do business. Business is very transactional, right? And the families shouldn't be transactional. So how do you keep those? And that
Mm,
and the family part is important. How do we make sure that family stays intact? I've seen situations where families suffer because they can't differentiate those two, right?
Yeah.
And
It, it unfortunately is often the norm that typically what we see happens. And I think that in our view, the family is the legacy. The family i- is the hope that continues for multi generations. We ask very simple questions. Like when we work with families, we'll say we can help you transition your wealth to the next generation intact, tax efficiently, but the family in that next gen is broken, not connected. There's not enough care in the system. Is that success to you? And the answer is always no.
Right.
So
Good. Good.
hope people, I think it's part of it too, is because we're family and we're connected. There's almost this, I'll say it, this laziness that we're going to be okay because we're family. And of course,
Yeah.
we care for each other, and that's enough. And through the work that we've been blessed to do for this
Yeah.
time, it takes a lot of work to maintain
I
and build
imagine.
on the relationship capital so that the legacy is the family, not just the financial capital piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I completely can get that. Yes. So, you know, constructs such as, um, leadership cohesion, right? We look at that quite a bit. And what is that? That is how well are our leaders, like leading gen, or getting along and working together. That is it's similar to a family model. Watching mom and dad. Are they arguing? Are they working well together? Are they making good decisions, together, and going through, whatever they're doing in a cohesive way.
Yeah.
Um, so we measure that, right? And if your leaders are not working well together, it just translates down through the whole organization.
Yeah.
So that's one I would say is a good measure, right?
Yeah.
That leadership cohesion piece.
That's interesting because Dan,
Okay.
leadership cohesion is not on my success index, but I might
Yeah.
need to add it because you're
Oh,
saying
but
that's a good
no, but
KPI.
I will tell you peripherally, you touching a lot of those things, and
Yeah.
you're measuring a lot of good things. So yeah, yeah. So
Well, keep
absolutely.
going because you're helping me fill in the gaps here. What else
Okay.
besides
Okay.
leadership cohesion?
Cohesion in general, right? How well are people working together? How much do they like each other? Organizational fit. You talk about value alignment and those types of things, right? So yeah, how well does an individual's value set and their interests fit within that organizational structure?
Yeah.
The idea of say a rising gen and what you want them to do might not be the fit for them, right? And so how do you find that fit, right? The idea of belongingness and connectedness, right? The idea is, do I feel like I really belong as part of this organization, or not? And do I have people to turn to confide in, actually, that trust we talked about. Balance of authority and responsibility, right? Am I given a lot of responsibility, but I'm really trusted to make the decisions can make?
Huge.
Autonomy, feelings of autonomy. Am I trusted to make these decisions on my own, or is it always, handheld? And how do I get to be more autonomous? Because we all want to feel like we have some control over our own situation. A big one, been looking at is effective decision making, right? Not on the fly, not from an emotional standpoint, but truly having a decision-making process, not just for an individual, because we study decision-making a lot at the individual level, but how do teams make decisions? What are they doing in the boardroom? Are you structured? Are you following that? Or are you just kind of getting outside of the boardroom and then just, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, the transparency piece, that's huge. Um, I said trust and leadership, psychological safety, that again, that willingness to know, hey, if I have a disagreement, I can come forward, and there's not going to be, I'm not going to be the bad guy, and I want to be able to speak up if something's wrong. Teamwork is a broad construct, right? And so when I talk about teamwork, it really comes down to like four different areas of teamwork, right? One is what I would call information exchange, and it's not communication necessarily. Is the information relevant? Is it timely? And is it important at that, basically at that time? Um, that, then backup behaviors. If somebody's floundering, is another family member going to come and help them out and pick
Mm.
them up by that boot? So teamwork can be broken out into a lot of different, like four basic dimensions. There's actually some models that have 9 dimensions and so on,
Yeah.
but at least 4 buckets of how you would really operationalize teamwork, right? And I have these jotted down. So, I talk about mentorship, um, and Yeah. So that's just a few. Yeah.
It's complicated as you're
It
describing.
is. It is.
Yeah.
But and you just don't throw them down like a laundry list, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is, how do these relate to your outcomes?
Yeah.
Right. And you don't need to measure all of these things because some of them are interdependent.
Yeah.
Just be very deliberate about how you would go about measuring those things.
What makes it so complicated in our space is obviously the family component, right? And I love what you said too about if a team member, a sibling, a cousin, a relative is not pulling their weight, as a layman's term,
Yeah.
what are the consequences to that? What we often see in family enterprise, that stuff gets swept under the rug,
Oh, yes.
and
Yes.
because the family they move on and all that. Little Johnny or little Sarah will eventually figure it out. But in a corporate world, in particular, like the military world, there's a reinforcement of positive behavior, and there's a consequence for negative behavior. For the folks that have listened to Kristen and I talk now for the past 12 to 18 months on these podcasts, you hear a lot of the same themes. How do we take the good from organizational structures and try to bring some of that into the family system? And
Right.
it's not easy, as we know,
No.
because of that family dynamic. And I think it's for me, it's refreshing to hear you say, like, the same thing is happening,
Oh, it
or
is.
we can take the same mindset and try to apply it with our family enterprises. What we often again, it's that human centric, getting in the way of one another. And a lot of it is really starting with that mindset shift. Like, if we want to go here, we must change our mindset to embrace a new way of being together.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, what you said was perfect. And it caused me to think about something. And that idea is a willingness to engage in the difficult conversations and to make it non-attributional, right? It's about what's going on. It's not about the person. And when typically in a family situation, it's more emotionally charged and it's attributional, right?
Yeah,
You're always doing this or whatever that might be. So non-attributional conversation, difficult conversations, feedback with that idea that, hey, we're all on a journey together, right? That we're all in this together, is an important component of that. So, yeah.
good.
Dan, I'm
Kristen,
curious to know if you get a list of things, that a team would need to improve, from trust to teamwork to leadership cohesion. How do you go about prioritizing what to work on first?
What I would do is whatever we measured, look at the logic model itself. What precedes what, right? Try to get to the root cause first as much as
Mm.
possible. So that logic model, we might have three or four levels to it, 2 or 3 levels to it. And I would go first, what's the cause? But if not, what's the easier and the quickest? A lot of times when we implement solutions, you want to get some low hanging fruit, right? If you show some success, it creates more motivation and more enthusiasm around the process itself. So if we can get some quick wins, it creates an energy around, doing more to then, pull that string and let's get to so I go for the quick wins and I also go for the root cause, if you will.
good.
I love that.
And you
Thank you for
can't just
that.
do that with a survey. A lot of times we follow up with interviews and focus groups. Because the survey can only do so much. It's a nice tool to start with and kind of get your bearings. But then going in and doing some focus groups and interviews or other types of more qualitative allows you to get in, to understand that a little bit better.
Great. Dan, you have distilled 30 plus years of a wonderful career in minutes or so on our podcast. We thank you for your contribution to the space. Thanks for joining us today on the Family Wealth Edge, and we'll see you soon, folks.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And before we sign off, actually, let me
Yes.
go back there. Where can we find more about you? Where are you at? Where can the folks, if they want more information about Dan, where can we
Okay.
find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So I provided a QR code. That might be a way to, check me out on LinkedIn. Also have a website. It's performanceabsolute.com. So,
Okay.
come check me out there, and drop me a message. Love to talk to anybody.
Great. We'll put all that information in the call notes and the show notes. Again, thanks everybody for joining us on another episode of the Family Wealth Edge.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. It's good.
Bye, Dan. Thank you.
Bye-bye.